have control of their user interface because they're just buying an off-the-shelf user interface. So they're almost literally just putting their brand name on it.
Alright, shall we get started, everyone? If you don't have a seat, could you take a seat, please? So, welcome everyone. Thanks, Lo, for coming down. I'm Tim Corrigan, and I'm a technical mentor here at Launch 22. So Launch 22 is a startup incubator, and what they do is they provide three main things. That is the workspace, which you see here, which is a co-working space with some fixed desk space as well. And additionally, free events like this one. There's all sorts of networking events and other educational events in the areas of startups and businesses. And finally, they provide mentoring as part of the membership. And there's actually 30 mentors now in different fields. Like I say, I'm a technical mentor, but as a member of Launch 22, you can request to see any mentor anytime, and that's sort of included in your package. So, hopefully today, we are going to navigate the technical landscape, pick apart some vocabulary, and sort of equip ourselves to be part of technical conversations, possibly as non-technical founders or as non-developers. So I was just wondering first, if I could get a show of hands, who would consider themselves a non-technical founder? Brilliant. You're in the right place. Has anyone tried to recruit a developer or a technical partner? Yeah, a couple of laughs there. How did that go?
Not so well.
Not so well. What was the problem?
They wanted to be paid.
Right. Okay. Yep. Any others?
Well, in my case, I think it did go well because I knew the person and I knew what I wanted.
Yeah.
And he was very much the kind of person that I needed. So it was very kind of smoothly, straightforward conversation from day one. So it kind of worked because one complements the other.
Yeah.
So yes, I'm completely non-technical, but my background is completely different from his. Yeah. And so it's been working
So
well
good experience.
so far.
Yeah. Okay. So mixed experiences. Okay. Well, we're going to talk a lot more about working with technical people and developers a bit later in the talk. But if you have any specific questions, just shout into them. So, the land of tech. This is my version of the land of tech. So, the technical landscape is huge, as you probably know. And not only is it huge, but it's continuously moving, it's continuously evolving. New technologies come out not only every year, not only every month, but every week. And on top of that, your software or your app or your application will never be done. When new user interface standards come out or new technologies come out, your application becomes obsolete really quickly. Security vulnerabilities get found in existing software, and you need to patch your server or whatever it is. Otherwise, you're going to be hacked. It's a continuously moving environment. It's a challenge. It's a huge world, and it's a challenge. You may even be using some third-party services, and they get bought by some big player like Google or Facebook, as happened to a service that a startup I'm working with right now did, and then it gets shut down, and you have to completely replace it with something different. So it's a bit of a minefield. So my goal today is to give you some tools to navigate this technical landscape. And the three main areas I'm going to concentrate is a kind of phrase book, which is some basic vocabulary, some technical terms, which I think are the most key ones, which you can take away and basically be able to then be part of the technical conversation. Secondly, some signposts and diagrams that you can use to basically see the big picture of the technical landscape and where your business and application fits into it. And finally, how to find what I call a technical guide. So a guide which is a technical partner or could be a developer that's is going to build your application or you're going to work with, so, and how to best work with those kind of people. So we're going to start by putting together a short technical phrasebook. So I'm not going to baffle you with hundreds of technical terms, but I'm just going to give you a few really key ones, which I think will help you to get you started and at least allow you to start with those conversations. So you might be wondering what these interesting buzzers are that I've placed around the room. So first of all, I'm a techie myself. I'm a developer by background, and I'm guilty of using technical terms and baffling people just as much as any other are. I'm not going to pretend that I'm perfect at this. I try to, when I'm talking to a founder, I try to look out for that kind of glazed look in their eyes. That you see it sort of goes like this, or maybe they've got a little kind of twitchy thing going on. And I try to see that and correct myself, but I don't always get this right. So we're going to have a bit of fun with this, hopefully. And the idea of the buzzer is that if I use a technical term, which I haven't explained, or you find baffling, or you don't understand in any way, I really want you to feel that you're able to press the buzzer. Thank you. So that I all the time. And then I will stop and explain it. And the idea is that there shouldn't be anything in this talk which we can't share together and have a chance of understanding. So I'm going to test how comfortable you feel with the buzzer with a bit of a calibration round. So I'm going to say a few terms, and if there's one that you don't feel comfortable with, I want you to press the buzzer. Everyone ready? Fingers at the buzzers.
That's my favourite.
Okay, website. Come on. You don't know what website is? Yeah. App. HTML. Okay, good. Database. SQL. Yeah, I thought I got that one. Okay, thank you. So just feel free anytime to press the buzzer. By the way, SQL is a language which is used for querying databases. So it's a way of saying to a database, get me a certain set of data based on some criteria. Is that makes sense? Yeah, exactly. That's great. Great. So, I'm going to talk through what I think are the few key terms for your tech phrasebook. And whilst I talk about this, I'm going to use an analogy of a restaurant, because I think that that's going to help us to to remember it and to put it into kind of a real context. So the first one I want to talk about is the term MVP. So MVP isn't strictly a technical term, but it is one that is used a lot to refer to a piece of technology that you're building as part of your business. So it stands for minimal viable product, and what this means is the simplest or easiest version of your product or your business that you can build in order to prove your business assumptions and basically get to market. In technology terms, that often means a simple version of your app, a cut-down version of your website, basically the smallest version you can make. And with our restaurant analogy, imagine we're in that strange tech landscape. If we're trying to start our MVP in that tech landscape, then maybe we're trying to build the simplest possible restaurant or cafe. So no frills, the minimum features.
Actual build, sorry, is it an actual build or is it just like a concept?
Good question. So the question was, is an MVP an actual build or is it a concept? It's both. So an MVP doesn't even need to be an application that you build. It's really whatever you can do in order to test your business assumptions. However, that often does mean building some kind of piece of technology.
Prototype.
Yeah, it could be a prototype, yeah.
But it's got to actually touch the market. It's not.
Exactly, yeah. has to actually touch the market. It has to prove some assumption about your business. It has to demonstrate that your business is in some way viable in a real market. So a prototype that you just show a few friends is not really an MVP. Something which you launch to some number of real customers is definitely an MVP. Okay, so there's a few more terms. So the next one I want to talk about, in fact, they're kind of a pair, and people often use these terms front end and back end. Has anyone heard those terms before? Lots of nods. Okay. So this is something developers talk about all the time and don't necessarily explain what it is. So essentially, front end is the presentation or user interface of your application. So this could be a mobile app, it could be a web-based interface, or even a desktop application. And with our restaurant analogy, it's everything that the customer to the restaurant uses to interact with the restaurant. So we're talking about the table, the chairs, the cutlery, and also how it's presented, so the decor of the restaurant as well. So that's your front end, the user interface to your application or business. So the other half of this is the back end. So the back end is more like the brain and memory of your application. So in technical terms, it probably includes something called a server, which is basically a computer in a data center somewhere. And feel free to buzz. And that is managing all the data of your application and the communication between the various front ends like apps and web applications. And in our restaurant analogy, the back end is basically.
I was just going to ask, in your restaurant analogy,
Yes.
what would you consider the servers who go both into where the customers are and into the memory of the kitchen?
So do you mean the waiters?
Yeah.
So the waiters are like the interface between the front end, the customers, and the back end, which is the kitchen. So if you're reading from a menu, that's the menu of things that the restaurant can give you, or in tech terms, that means the menu of functions that your application can deliver. And the server, or the waiter, is the one that communicates that to the back end, i.e. the kitchen, and delivers you your food.
So you're deliberately using play on words between waiter and server?
That's a bit confusing.
No, you're not, are you? Because I would consider the server to be where the kitchen itself.
Yes, that's correct. So yeah, let's use waiter or waitress, and then the server is part of the kitchen if we're talking about the technical terms.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've got MVP, minimal viable product. Front end, our presentation for our application. Back end, our brain and memory. Another term which you'll hear a lot when you're starting a business or talking to developers is tech stack. And this is a really simple one to explain. Tech stack is basically a list of technologies, and all it is a list of the technologies used to deliver a particular application or business. So it might include a couple of different programming languages. Maybe you've got one used in your front end and a different one used in your back end. It might include the type of database that you use, or the type of server that you use to run your application. Another really important one, and this is the final one in our really quick phrase book for now, is API. So I get asked a lot about this. It stands for Application Programming Interface, but you really don't need to remember that. What you need to remember is that it is a common language used by two software services to talk to one another. Okay, so there are lots of APIs out there on the internet, and they could be borrowed by some third parties. So Google has APIs, Amazon has APIs, all sorts of people have APIs. And the API is a way for your server, your system, your application to talk to those third-party servers and make use of them. I'll give an example of a real, in fact I'll give one now. So an example of a use of an API is, say we're building an application, say it's a mobile app, and we want to show a map of where our users are right now. Maybe it's a travel app and it's based on their location. We don't really want to go and implement mapping. We don't really want to go and get all the map data. We definitely don't want to keep that up to date. That sounds horrendous. And we don't really want to do the programming which handles maps because it's been done before. So we can kind of reuse that if someone else is going to provide that for us. And lots of companies do that. Google's one of them. And so we can use Google's API as a language for our application to talk to Google in order to perform mapping functions. Frown? Question?
I'm wondering how that fits into your restaurant.
That fits into the restaurant analogy.
Would it be like someone that the kitchen sources products from?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. So maybe it's a wine supplier. Yeah, which is supplying a third party, which is supplying part of the service that that restaurant offers. And the API would be the way that you interface with that third party business, so the way you order the wine if it's a wine supplier. Yeah, makes sense? Good, okay. So I think that these few terms that I've covered are enough to get you started in conversations about tech startups. There's lots more, but if you can talk about these and see where the other components fit into those, then you can start the conversation. So we've got some kind of vocabulary now, and we can talk a bit about technology, but we can't really make a decision about it yet, can we? It feels sort of we can kind of talk about it and maybe understand a little bit, but it's a lot harder to actually take part in a real decision about it. So what I'm going to go on to do is give you some kind of signposts and maps that will help you to see the big picture, see how different software components fit together, and hopefully use those to be able to make decisions for your business. So, one of the questions I get asked a lot is what languages and technologies are best for which types of business or which types of application? And the answer is there isn't really a right or wrong, but I'm going to describe some of the highest level options for you. So the answer to this question for me fits into two main categories. The first one is existing platforms or software and using those. And the second one is bespoke software, i.e. writing your own software or having a developer write it for you. So when would we use sort of an existing software platform? An example is if you are just starting out and you want to put up a website and you want to test some of your business assumptions. Maybe you want to sign up for a mailing list, or maybe you're selling one product and you have one button to sell it. So you can do this with what we call a brochure website. And it's basically a website that you can customize yourself and write your own content on. And you can do that yourself with something like Squarespace or WordPress. And there's really sort of no need to engage a developer to do that. A step on from that, but still within the existing software platform world. If you're doing something like e-commerce, or if you're going a bit further and you're starting to have users and some kind of interaction, then you still might be able to do it with an existing platform or service. Something like Shopify for e-commerce, or WordPress has a lot of free plugins available. You can even have users logging in, signing up. You can have a mobile experience. You can have some kind of interaction between users. So you might find that you can do your MVP or parts of your business with existing software platforms like that. And this really is an order of magnitude cheaper than hiring a developer to do bespoke development. And if you can do that, if you can do a proof of concept using existing software, then I'd encourage you to do that first. So, yes.
Using existing software is gone off. Using existing software Does that mean cutting and pasting, or does that mean something else?
So I mean a package which is typically called a CMS, which stands for Content Management System. So that means basically it's a website and you've got an admin screen which you can use to customize it. You're not coding,
Oh, okay.
you're configuring maybe, but you've got an admin panel and you're creating pages. Maybe you're installing a plugin.
Like software basically, just
It's online. So
Okay.
it's, yeah.
Drag and drop.
Drag and drop, yeah. Some of those can get slightly technical if you're doing more advanced things, but it's something that anyone can have a go at.
Is it the Wix? Is it the Wix?
Yep. That's
Common
another,
one.
that's another good example. Yeah.
Do it yourself website.
In fact, Launch 22 have a fairly regular talk which I've seen on the events calendar about exactly this, about how to build your own website with no technical knowledge to get you started with a great website. So that's another one you can look out for. So that's sort of one side, and then the second general approach to what technologies you can use is bespoke development. So custom development is basically, as we found out, expensive, but if you're building something that is new, that can't be done with existing software or plugins, then it's your only route. I'd just encourage you to know what you're doing as much as possible before you start. So most of the rest of what I'm going to talk about is in the area of bespoke development. So, okay, I'm going to show you a couple of diagrams which I hope you will be using some of the terms and concepts that we've talked about. And basically the point is, if you draw things, or have them drawn for you, or do that with a developer, then you've got a lot more chance of seeing how things fit together and understanding the general flow of data through your application. Okay. So the most simple software architecture is basically a website, and this picture here shows that. So on the left we have a web browser, which is just a web browser on your computer, and on the right we have a server, which is the computer and the data center, which is your brain and your memory of your application. And all we have is the browser is when the user comes to your web page, the browser needs to go and fetch stuff from the server. It needs to go and fetch your web page itself, the images, any other assets that are used to show your page. Okay? So, actually this arrow's the wrong way around, sorry. So it's going to make a request to the server, and the server is going to respond with, here's that document, here's that image, here's that asset.
It fits in with the kitchen analogy as well, because you have the customers on one side and the kitchen, and the waiter going in between.
Exactly.
That's my...
Yeah. So if you imagine you're asking for a starter, and it's returned from the kitchen, which is the server, or you're asking for your drink or your main course. So it's a series of requests which the browser, which is our front end that we talked about before, is making to our server, and that's coming back to our browser. So we can make this a tiny bit more complicated by adding a mobile app. So a mobile app is just another type of front end. So it's doing exactly the same as the browser on the computer. It's making requests to exactly the same server, and all of your data and all of your server logic, your kitchen's basically the same. But maybe the mobile app is a hatch at the front of your restaurant, and people are ordering takeaway. So the front end experience, the user experience is different, but the way it's requested and the actual food you get is the same. I'm just going to add one more. So now I've added in a third-party server. So this is some third-party I gave the example of Google with a map API. And now we've got our server talking to some third-party server via its API, via its language that we can use to communicate with it. And that's it really. That's you're basically looking at a software architecture diagram, and hopefully you understand what all the terms are. Is this a good point to ask if there's any confusion or any questions? How we doing? Yes, sorry.
Sorry.
Okay.
APIs. Can you, for example, can you customize it so it appears it's obviously Google Maps you're using, but it appears like it's your website's own map, or would it be based on appears using Google Maps?
So yes, you can customize it. So it depends on their API. So Google's API is basically a way of your application talking to it. So it will have different options when you talk to it. So you might say, get me a map that's this big. Get me a map where there's a dot where the user is right now. Get me a map, but also can you show me restaurants on that map? So you're basically using its data and its application as a third-party source for your application.
I think
So,
sorry,
yeah.
my fault. Google Maps were not good. So if you were like selling holidays and you had an API from Expedia,
Yeah.
would that be customizable as your own? So it looked like they're browsing on the website to look for flights, to look for holidays.
Yes. So I don't know about Expedia's API specifically, but if they have an open API and that API is a interface to their application and it's freely available, then your application can totally talk to it and say, get me the flights on this day with these criteria. It's returning that to you. I mean, this is all in code. This is all kind of behind the scenes within your server, within your application. And the way you present that, which is your front end, is entirely up to you.
And then obviously if your customer goes on your website and it books a flight on the Expedia API, it does come through your website. They sync in real time is what I mean.
So your question is, so do they book it on Expedia?
Well, if you're, I'm not a travel agent, but
Yeah.
say you were a travel agent,
Yeah.
and you had Expedia API on your website, which is how you were selling your holidays and your flights. You went onto your website and booked a holiday in Spain, flights through EasyJet, whatever, using the Expedia information. It's on your website. Does that automatically also send that information to Expedia so they know not to resell that holiday and that flight? Or
Could do.
does it
It could depend. So it depends on the specifics of that API. So if the Expedia API is allowing you to actually make a booking via it and say, I'm booking this flight, then the answer is yes. If it doesn't and it's just giving you the information, then no, you're booking it through whatever other means you use. So it depends on the specifics there.
So it depends on Expedia's API, not on how you...
It depends on Expedia's API and then also how you use it as well.
Right.
So, yeah. Does that help?
Thanks.
Okay. So, I'm going to show you briefly how I manage projects. I'm hoping that this will help you a little bit with how to work with developers and how to talk to developers. It's a little bit small, sorry, but basically what we've got is a Trello board. Is anyone not familiar with Trello? Where's the puzzle? There you go. Thank you. Not familiar with Trello? So Trello is a application which is free, which lets you have lists of tasks or tasks basically, or cards. And you can write them really easily, and you can have as many columns as you want. It's completely customizable, and you can drag tasks or cards between different columns. So yeah, it's really handy. Yeah, check that out. So the way I manage a simple software project is with a Trello board with 4 columns, which is the backlog or to-do list, things that we want to do, the ones that we're doing right now, the ones that are ready for review, and the ones that are done. So that you can think of these as 4 different states of a particular feature that you're working on that your developer's working on or that you want to be put into your application. And lots of different project management methodologies use something along these lines, so you'll come across these terms, whatever system they use. So some of the key points, though, are that it's flexible. So especially with a startup, but with any software project, it's notoriously hard to predict at the start how long things are going to take, what kind of obstacles you're going to come up against, and also what decisions you might make during that process and what changes you might make. So the idea is that the to-do list, which is the column on the left, is flexible until the point when you actually start work on one of those cards or stories. So, and furthermore, it's something that the developer and the business owner should work on together. So it's a way of defining your requirements. It's a way of saying, here's the things we want to do, and they might be the titles of your cards in Trello. And then the detail of those cards is the detail of exactly what you're going to do. And the order of the to-do list is priority order. So the nearer the top, the higher priority, and the sooner you're going to get to it. So the idea is, if I'm a developer, I want to start on my next bit of work, I'm going to take the card off the top of the to-do list, and I'm going to move it onto the doing or in progress column, the second column. So by the time that it gets to the top, it should be well defined enough that I know enough that I can start work on it. But some of the things much further down, we might not have figured out exactly yet, and that's okay. Okay, so this basically supports flexibility. So the business owner can rearrange things. So the developer might be working on something at the moment, and the business owner can rearrange the things on the left. Oh, I realise this other feature is more important now, so I'm going to move it to the top. Or I've figured out some more detail about this thing, so I'm going to add it to one of my cards. So once a story or a feature is built, then I would move it to the ready for review column. And that means it's ready for the business owner to, I'm going to give them a demo or some way of viewing it, and they're going to try it, and they're going to tell me if it's acceptable or if there's more work to do on it. If it's done and it's acceptable and everything's fine, they're going to move it to the done column, and then it's done. Like, it's ready to go live to real users. That's what done means. Often software developers use the word done, and they don't really mean done. They mean done, I can show you, but I've got to do all these technical things yet to actually make real users use it. So it's really important to almost have a definition of what done means, and done means it's either live now or it's ready to go live and be used by real users. That's a key thing, I think, when talking to developers. So if there are more things to do, then it goes back to the in progress or doing column. And that's about as simple as you can make it, but basically what this described is what's known as an agile development process. And the idea of it is basically built-in flexibility and built-in regular feedback. So if you're talking to developers and they are doing something like this, something along these lines with this flexibility, then I would say that's a really good thing. It's for any software project, but especially for a startup, because you want to be able to think on your toes, you want to be able to refine things, and you want to be able to be involved in the day-to-day decisions that get made as part of your product.
So what's the alternative to this? Would be contracts stuck in rigid?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So the more traditional approach is writing a specification, which might be pages long. Of here's what I'm going to build, and saying to a developer, okay, I want you to build this. They give you a quote, and there's probably some things they're not quite sure about, so they're probably going to pad their quote a bit, and then they're going to go away and build it, and they're going to come back with it done. And that works for really small projects, like maybe a few weeks, but if it's a few months, it really works, because there'll be something that you haven't figured out, there'll be something which changes, there'll be something that you change your mind about during the process anyway. So I'd encourage, if you yes?
So how do you keep track of if one thing, you change one thing, it affects something there?
Do you mean in this process or in software?
Possibly in this process, that you have to keep track of the whole trail of something you're doing, because,
Yeah. Well, so this basically does track the trail. So one of these is a card. Each of these. There's a feature or story that you want to implement. And you can see the lifetime of that story travel across the board. And once it's done, then it's finished, it's done, but it stays there, and you can still refer back to that as the history of your project. Does that make sense?
So you keep an audit trail.
This basically gives you, this is the simplest way of giving you a flexible audit trail for your project. Yeah.
So you can't be doing things without noticing anything affected.
Exactly. So that's the point. So the developer's using this, but equally the business owner is using this day to day and is engaged in it. So it's your way of sharing how the project's going. And
can you have 2 or 3 developers using that?
Yes.
Same one?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah. There's a bunch of features in here which I can go into later. So I use the colours you've got here are difficulty. So green is easy, orange is medium, red is hard. And so a business owner can use that to help make decisions about priority. So there might be, say, a bunch of greens coming up and a red, and they might go, oh, I'd much rather you did like 4 greens, 4 easies instead of 1 red, so I'm going to put them higher. I might estimate something as hard as red, and I might go, oh, why is that hard? I thought that would be easy. Let's talk about that a bit more and actually understand why that's hard, because maybe we can find another way. And it's those kind of flexible, regular communications which help you to get more value for money and a better product.
I was going to ask you a question.
Sure.
So how are you managing, the one thing I found with the Agile approach is that you're not able to pre-budget, because what will happen is quite often you'll you'll say to someone, this is my basic budget, this is my spec, this is what I want to achieve. And along the course of building this product, you realize that things need to change. And then these guys will then build it, and they'll come to you with a massive build. So how have you found, especially for a startup which is restricted by budgets, how have you found managing the Agile, the flexibility, this sort of trade-off, right? There's a sort of trade-off.
Yes.
You get the flexibility of being able of staying agile and being able to accommodate all these changes you want, but at the same time they come at a cost. Have you been able to sort of balance this sort of trade-off?
That's a great question. So what I do is I work in an agile way, but depending on the client and the budget available, I will probably estimate. So I'd probably work in some, are you familiar with sprints?
Yes.
So a sprint is, the sprint's an agile term which basically means a period of time in which a developer is going to deliver some of this stuff. They're not actually necessary for this to work, but you might say, I've got a 2-week sprint, and what you might do is say, look at the overall scope of your project, and I might say, I think that's 3 sprints. The other thing that I think is quite good is for a developer to commit to delivering a sprint worth of work. So what you might do is you might use your Trello board, and you might say, okay, the top 10 stories, the top 10 cards are going to be 1 sprint, and I'm going to do that into a 1-2-week sprint. And as a developer, I'm going to commit to you that I'm going to deliver that in 1 sprint. Because then you get that guarantee. You don't necessarily get the guarantee for the whole project because you want to build in flexibility.
I think for me, it has been tough because you're starting a project, you want to know when you get to at the end, and the developer says, okay, well, I'm going to do 1 week's worth of work. So they go away, do 1 week's worth of work, you pay for it, and I think the issue is you don't know how many weeks you're going to need before you get to your end goal. And for me, the issue has always been this idea that you could go on and on and on and on and burn through the cash before you actually build your product. With no guarantee what you're going to get at the end. So that's, I think for me that's the main dilemma or the tragedy of startups using the agile system. I just thought I'd put it out there.
Yeah, so it is a dilemma, and it's kind of a bit scary So like I said, the way I would handle that is I would estimate the number of sprints.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be sort of saying we're going to go endlessly.
Yeah.
I'm going to be going, what's your MVP for a start? And I would look at that and go, maybe your MVP is 2 or 3 sprints, which is fairly estimatable anyway. The alternative is like doing a fixed price based project, which can be really good for short projects, but the bigger the project, the more likely that is to go wrong in terms of overscope and so on.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people do those because it seems more reassuring and maybe it seems more cheap, but doesn't necessarily work any better because they find that they want to make some change and the developer adds loads more work on to do it, or maybe it's just not feasible in that time anyway, so they go over budget or they deliver late or whatever anyway. So the fundamental problem is estimating software development's really hard for anything that's longer than a few weeks, depending what it is, but yeah.
So do you give like a ballpark figure at the start?
Yeah.
And then sort of add to it.
So that's what I do as my compromise actually. So I do the agile way with sprints, but I'll commit to a 2-week sprint. So you've got a guarantee of what's going to be the next 2 weeks. But I'll also give a pretty solid estimate of the number of sprints to give the kind of thing. But the important thing is that you're working together more as a team. If that makes sense, rather than you saying to the developer, go away and build me this thing, and I've described it in this two-page document. It's more like you're working as a team to find the best ways to build a vision.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. One more thing about this. There's a great sentence structure you can use to try to capture a requirement. And that's the sentence I've got at the bottom. So the idea is that you say, as a something, I want something, so that something. And the as a is like the actor or who it is. So it might be as a mobile app user of my business. I want to see my current location on a map. Sorry, I want to see my current location so that I can see travel services that are around me, for example. Now, a lot of people miss off the so that, and it's actually quite important because it can really change what you end up building. Sometimes what you do is when you use this technique and use this sentence structure, you think you know why you're going to build something, but when you come to do it, you realise that, so maybe you're putting in analytics or adverts or something like that, you realise that it's actually not for the user, it's for you as a business, and then maybe you rethink why you do it or so on. So I mean that's probably a whole talk in itself, but just a sentence structure you can use to help you to think about a requirement when you're talking with developers.
Can I ask another?
Yes, of course you can.
2 questions.
Yes.
The first one is from what Gentleman there said regarding the cost. I've had quotes on my website ranging from 10,000 to 70,000,
Okay.
which obviously is quite different.
Yes.
All of which swear blind that this will be the best website ever, all bells and whistles and etc.
Yeah.
I'm not the remotely technical person, hence why I'm here.
Yeah.
So how do you cut through bollocks and actually figure out which one is able to deliver what they say they can deliver? Because again, everyone swears blind that theirs is the best possible product.
Sure. There's a number of ways, I guess. I mean, you can look at their track record and their existing projects. If the one that's quoting 10 grand has delivered a lot of successful projects and you can go and see them and they're working well, maybe you can even talk to the owners of those businesses, then that's going to speak volumes for a start. Secondly, you can go on some other factors like communication and the way they're working. So
they also quote from and starting and ending points in terms of, so 10,001 it was anything from 7 to 14, 70,000 was 50 to 70.
Oh, okay.
So again, you're saying that, and I get why you'd overestimate because everyone does that when you're selling something, variables built in, etc.
Yeah.
But in your experience, would it normally, unless they add lots of extras onto it, would it normally be the lower end of the quote or would it be the higher end of the quote?
I'm guessing the higher end, and I guess you've got to account for that. But I think that's why I'm encouraging you to take a really active role in the sort of day-to-day running of the project.
I have spelled it out,
that make sense?
like down to the customer teams, like the eyes of every single person I've spoken to,
Okay.
what needs to be done.
Yeah.
And yet still there's such
And
a
they've
huge
said 50 to
discrepancy.
70.
Well, that was the highest one.
Yeah.
Lowest one was, I think, 7 to 14 or
7
12.
to 14, which
But
is sort of
I
double.
scanned them already because I had no faith in them, just the way they were communicating.
Well, there you're using your intuition. Yeah, communication is so important.
I just don't understand how you can have that huge a discrepancy.
It's because they don't know.
70 is a lot.
It's because they don't really know.
Well,
So,
it's quite a large software house. They've done hundreds of websites.
Really?
So they should know, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You know, if it's your first or second or third website, you don't know, but if you've done lots and lots of them,
Yeah.
then you should
Maybe it sounds like quite a big project for that size quote.
say.
Yeah. So maybe there's some aspects they haven't done before, or
No, I don't think so.
yeah.
Big but fairly standard.
Yeah. Okay. Another thing you could do is find a technical advisor who could help you with that process of making those choices.
How would you go about that?
You can network in places like this. So that's something I do here as part of the mentoring for Launch 22 members, for example. So that's exactly the kind of question I'd get, and I'd go through and I'd look at those proposals and we talk them through and we weigh up pros and cons and so on. But maybe you can find someone you know technical, or someone who knows someone in your network, or sort of general startup networking, really. So you turn those two down and then you're going to look for other quotes, are you?
I'm still getting funding in place, but that's
Right.
kind of not too far off.
Yeah.
So I could narrow it down in my head at least to two,
Yeah.
those 2 or 3
Or
other.
maybe you've got an investor with some knowledge or someone they know that can
Not
help
as
with it.
such, no.
Yeah,
No,
it's
not
difficult.
like that,
Yeah,
but-
okay. Well, have a chat at the end and I'll see if I can...
Last question,
Yes,
not
sure.
to do with that, is would you suggest, every quote I've had so far has integrated the quote with the front end and the back end, and
Okay.
they do all of it. Would you, in your experience, suggest maybe hiring a specialised front end person and then an agency to do the back end, or a developer to do the back end? Because it's two different, very different skill sets, isn't it?
They can be, they don't have to be. There's some languages you can use to implement both in one language. And depending on your application, the way they work together can be quite integrated. So I would have my gut feel, without knowing the specific, my gut feel is I would go for one developer, one company that can deliver the whole thing, because otherwise you're going to run into they didn't do quite the thing that we thought they would do. So we've got this trouble now, and
You made excuses.
it's well, not even an excuse, but also just a barrier, it's another communication barrier in what you're trying to build. Yeah, sure.
So following from the lady's question,
Yeah.
if she's a customer, she's approaching whatever an agency or app developer,
Yeah.
does she or does she not need to be concerned about what stack they're using for her project?
That's a good question. Yes and no. So tech stack wise, there's a bunch of good tech stacks, and most of them, they have some pros and cons, but they're all pretty good. It's not a sort of showstopper. It's not one of your primary factors.
So just the next question to follow on. If she, whatever stack is given her, she accepts it,
Yeah.
and in 12 months from now, she goes from whatever 1,000 users to 1 million. The scaling thing, does the stack affect the scale, or how is that affected?
Yes. Yeah, no, it's a really good question. It does at very high scales. If you're Twitter or Facebook, yeah, it does. Twitter moved from Ruby on Rails to something called Scala a few years back because of exactly that problem. Ruby on Rails is perfectly good and scales to millions of users, but Twitter's a very specific case of how they use their data, and they change their tech stack because of that.
Is it quite easy to do to change the tech stack?
No. If you were the size of Twitter, that was probably quite expensive, I imagine. However, for the majority of startups, the kind of scale where that starts to matter is very high. You know, you're one of the massive internet giants before that kind of matters. Most of the common tech stacks are perfectly suited to scale reasonably well to most applications, I would say.
So I'm thinking relationships, therefore, because the estimates can't really be itemised that clearly. Relationships, you know, good faith and so on and so forth, are really quite important. If you don't trust the person, you can't really work with them because they don't look you off.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm actually going to. That actually brings me quite well to the next thing I was going to talk about. Did you have a question? Okay. So I'm just going to talk about finding developers or technical partners or some kind of technical guide to work with, and that's the last kind of main thing I'm going to talk about. So there are a few options when you're starting out with your startup. One is to find a technical co-founder. This is a pretty good option if you can. This means you're going to convince someone with a technical background or a developer to come in and start the business with you, and they're probably going to have an equity share comparable to the other founders, and you're basically building the business together and your team. And that's great if you can find that person early on. What you might find is a lot of developers, they've got loads of work, they've got loads of opportunities, and you kind of really need to convince them that your startup is worth you know, is going to go there, and they have to be really fully on board with it. But yeah, you might be able to do that, and that's great. If you can, the only tip I would say is make sure you, obviously, as with any co-founder, you're going to get on with them, and you have a comparable work ethic, and all of those kind of personality things that you can imagine, and that you basically define your responsibilities. So what everyone's going to do, well, the kind of things everyone's going to be responsible for, and put that in some kind of written co-founder agreement. The second option is maybe if you're a little bit further on and you've got some funding or some funding incoming, is to hire a CTO or lead developer. And that's a great option too. That sort of can give you the kind of a lot of the same benefits of having a technical co-founder, but obviously you need some funding now to kind of pay that person. And they may well have some equity, probably a lot smaller than the co-founder option, or maybe performance pay, related pay. And so the third option, if you can't manage either of those, is to outsource your development, which we've already started talking about here. And that breaks down to a few different options as well. So one of them is offshoring. So we're talking about offshoring our development to another country where developers are cheaper. And this is probably your cheapest option, but probably the most risky as well. So I've talked to a lot of people who've used this kind of option. Some of them have told me horror stories where they've wasted months of money and months of time. Others have told me some quite good stories where they've got a great deal and they've had their application built. I think the general message is basically it's a mixed bag. But if you're going to go down that route, I think the real key is to really take your time in finding the person. It's going to take time and energy to find the person or company that you're going to work with. And once you are working with them, it's going to take time and energy continually managing that process. Again, as with any relationship with a developer, I think that the communication is key. If you can do things like this Trello board that I've shown you, the agile process, if you can do daily Skype calls, if you can do at least weekly deliveries, then you're in a much better place to combat the situations where maybe you feel it's spiraling out of control and you don't know where it's going to end because you chat to them every day, basically. The second type of outsourcing is maybe to use a local freelancer. So that means someone near to you that you can meet physically. So the main advantage of that is that you solve a lot of the communication problems. You've got a lot better chance to be able to communicate with them well. If you can meet physically, that's great. Maybe you can even co-locate for some or quite a bit of the work as well. And I think that's a great option if you can find someone you're happy to work with. And then the last option is probably the most expensive, and that's to use a development house or company, ideally one that's startup friendly. And so by startup friendly I mean knows the kind of challenges of startups, knows that you're going to have limited budget, is going to be able to turn around and almost encourage you to do very MVC-like practices and then build on it later, rather than quoting 70 grand. That sounds like a lot for anything, to be honest with you. Yeah, exactly.
That was actually not really relevant, but it was all the others that I had were London developers. That was the only one that was actually abroad. That was a Polish one, which I
And that was the expensive one.
Anyone.
That is unusual. It's
Yeah,
normally the other way around.
Exact reverse. If they
Right.
say like
Maybe
20,000.
maybe they didn't understand what you wanted somehow.
I think they did. It was very detailed.
Okay.
But, yeah,
Okay.
quite
That's
astronomically much higher than the
Very
rest.
interesting. Yeah.
We're upset.
Yeah, this is very common getting really widely varying quotes. Very common. So yeah, the only advice I can give you is choose an agile developer if you can, potentially with some guarantees in there as well. So maybe a bit of a hybrid approach might work for you, and really stress the communication is so important that you have to be able to communicate with them. Otherwise you don't know what you're getting. So, we've been around a bit of a big loop, and we've talked about some basic vocabulary for talking about technologies. We have looked at some overall big picture ways of choosing between different technologies. We've looked at some process on how to talk to developers, and also we've talked about how to find the different types of developers or technical partners or guides that we can use. But the last thing I want to leave you with really is don't be baffled by techies, by developers. Don't stand for them talking to you in a way, with terms that they don't know. If necessary, get your own technical alert buzzer, and just make them explain in plain English, because it is all explainable in plain English, given enough time. And just have the confidence to be active in the technical decisions of your business, because I think that as a startup, it's so important. The less active you are, the more you're delegating decisions to your developer or your technical partner. And that might be okay for some really technical stuff, but a lot of the decisions that they're going to make are going to impact your users. They're going to impact your future expansion, maybe technology stack, for example. And yeah, you're not going to completely make those decisions, but you can definitely have the confidence to be part of that conversation with them. So, I'm going to open up for questions, any more questions, and I'm also going to hand round a feedback form, if you don't mind. I'd love to get a bit of feedback on how you found the talk and whether you've got any suggestions. And then if you want to keep in contact or have any questions in future, my email and my Twitter on there. And if you have any questions about Launch 22, the incubator and the space, there's the email address on there as well. So I'm going to hand these around, but yeah, feel free to shoot with any questions. Yes?
Just a question about bringing in a CTO or senior technical lead with equity.
Yeah.
And bringing them not with outright equity, but with basically share options.
Yeah.
In order to have contingencies based in there, because you won't know this person incredibly well, close friend, for example. So they'll be able to sell how good they are to you, you get references, and you believe them eventually. But it may get down to the line year in where actually they're not as good as you thought they were.
Yeah.
And we don't want to have just given away equity and it be in a bad situation where that's the end of it. So what's your experiences with share options and clauses in share options regarding performances and etc.?
To be honest, I don't have tons of experience with specific options in specific clauses in share options. There might be a legal mentor here that might be able to help a bit more with that. in terms of share options in general, I think it's obviously a good thing, and maybe you can have a clause like, we've delivered this, we have, yeah, and they can be technical as well. We've delivered this bit of infrastructure, we've delivered this bit of features, and then those share options best, if you like. Is that the kind of thing you're thinking of?
I was going to say that vesting schedule.
Yeah, so vesting
exactly,
is vesting is one thing. So you have a bad leaver, good leaver type scenario as well. If you consider to be a bad leaver by your shareholders, then their shares, even though some of them may have vested, it can also be forfeited as well. There's many different creative things you can do in legal contracts. But I just wanted to know from your point of view, being a CTO and experience in this world, how much do you see it, and what typical kind of like things that you do see in that world? Because I know of it, and I've been advised from my lawyers that it's a good thing to do, but speaking to a technical person versus speaking to a lawyer is completely different things.
So, I mean, there's a couple of different aspects to that question, really, aren't there? So, as a technical person, I guess the question is, would I be open to those kind of clauses?
Yeah,
I think so. Yeah, I think if I'm going to a business as a CTO or lead developer and I'm taking share options, then and it's a startup, then I better deliver, right? I better be up to the job, and if I'm not, I don't deserve those. So I think that if you want to kind of push those options on me, then I think it's a good idea.
And is it commonplace that you've seen this?
I don't know, to be honest. I haven't
Most
done it.
startups have vesting agreements.
So vesting agreements, yeah. In terms of the exact terms, I'm not that familiar, I'm afraid.
Cool.
We can probably find you someone here that might be able to answer that a bit more. Afterwards. Catch me afterwards. Yeah.
Just in terms of using Trello for project management, I think that's quite good, so should I employ you, I can see what you're doing. Have you had any problems with prioritising or the person employing you understanding what's actually written in that Trello? Any disputes in terms of, like, who's prioritising what? Because I imagine you don't manage.
Yes, good question. So, in terms of the priorities, the idea is that if we have that to-do list or backlog on our left earlier in the Trello board, the idea is that the business owner is entirely responsible for the priority. So in terms of priority, there's no discussion really. It's all the business owner's decision. In terms of the detail of those stories or cards, yes, so sometimes there can be confusion, but the ideal is that you write those together. So the ideal is that you have a session per sprint if you're doing sprints, and you write those criteria or that detail of what you're doing together, and that means there's the least chance of there being confusion. And again, the daily calls and so on support that. Yes. Sorry, come back.
We've recently funded, so we're having our initial build put together by a development house, and the guy who's running that company is acting as an interim CTO for now, advising us, helping us build the product. We're working very closely.
Yeah.
Quite a small house, development house, but they're most of them are quite qualified. They're ex-IBM.
Okay.
But what we want to do in the next 6 months is try and actually look at bringing a CTO in-house, someone who we can hire on our own payroll. What does that look like, and what makes a good CTO? Because I think, we always see this, the CEO is normally the face of the company, the person who's, but a lot of the times the CEO does not know how to play the instrument. The CEO knows how to play the orchestra. The CTO knows how to play the instruments. And so, what does a CTO, what is his role? Does he have to play every instrument? Does he have to understand all the code? Does he have to manage people who can do those things? How much power should he be given? What responsibility does he have with strategy? I mean, these are sort of
That's
questions.
about 10 really good questions.
Sorry.
Let me do my best. What's a good CTO? I think it does depend a bit on the stage of your business. So if you're really early stage, then your CTO is probably going to be coding.
Yeah.
If you're a bit further on, then your CTO is not going to be coding. Does your CTO need to understand all the code or everything in your platform. Again, if you're just starting out, yeah. If you have 5 to 10 developers, no, because there's enough that they can make key decisions, and they need to be able to have those conversations with developers and the rest of the technical team. They need to be on the ball in terms of strategy. So that, like the technical strategy, they need to be able to make decisions like, okay, we've got these business priorities coming in from the CEO or whoever's the business owner or the users, but I also know we've maybe got this security issue, or maybe I know we've got this infrastructure issue which is going to hit us. They're the ones that need to drive that. So they're almost like a different driving force from a technical standpoint, if that makes sense. And that's why I think it's a really key role, because it's difficult for a non-technical CEO to do that. What else did you ask?
How much power is within the business to make decisions on his own accord without any input, what would I say?
Delegation.
Influence from the founders. If his CTO is not one of the founders himself.
Not that much, is my gut feel, because most decisions, and I think that's part of my point of this whole talk really, I think most decisions, even if they're technical ones, have some important influence on the business. So yeah, so there are like, so what build tool we're going to use to turn our code into something we're going to deploy something. Yeah, the CTO can make that decision. But most of the decisions are going to have some business impact. And I think, going back to Agile, there's one product owner, there's one business owner, right? One person who's where the buck stops, who's going to make the decision. And I think if there are technical considerations, I think it's up to the CTO to lobby that person almost to say, like, we need to do this. We have a security problem incoming in 2 months, we need to do this, otherwise we're exposed. And then the ultimate product owner can make the decision of weighing that up against, do we build this other new feature instead?
Yeah.
Which is that's a classic one which I get all the time actually. So no, I don't think that they should be given free rein to go and make a lot of decisions, certainly not high level ones. I think that they're an important stakeholder in the decision making process.
Okay, so to summarise, I guess you're seeing them more as an executionary role rather than a decision making one.
That's because I believe the best decision making process is if there's one ultimate decision maker. So they are influencing the decision making process heavily because they're advising that person, they're lobbying them to say we need to do this. And certainly in terms of like particular technologies to use, but I think that everyone should be involved in that conversation.
Okay.
Yes.
With the wireframe, I hope everyone knows what wireframe is. How detailed does it have to be, or because people are going to have different skill sets, they will not know exactly what the development house needs.
Yeah.
For example, this lady is probably non-technical, will do it different with someone like him knows probably a bit more. So
Yeah.
Can you explain briefly, give some guidelines on the wireframes?
So we're talking about a wireframe that we're giving to a developer or development house to ask to build up a project. Is that what you mean?
You'll say depend.
I think so. So there's a key thing about wireframing is that it's really cheap. Like wireframes, you can knock up, with some number of hours or days, right? And development is really expensive. So the more you do wireframing, the more you do to test your user interface or your concept, and the more you can do that in prototyping tools. And there's some tools that go beyond wireframing, and you can develop them online, like a wireframe, and then it can give you almost like a fake app.
Yeah, I know.
And people can actually play around with it.
Yeah.
The more you can do up front like that, the more decisions you're going to be able to answer before you start paying expensive developers. So there's no right or wrong, but I think the more you can
make it more realistic.
The more you can test with cheap technologies like wireframing and prototyping, the better.
So would that, if you actually produce a dummy, you do wireframe and then a dummy.
Yep.
You're saying that would reduce the cost to the developer? Would it?
Yeah.
Could it potentially? Yeah.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, because
And
how
the
much
time
does
as
it
well.
take to create that dummy thing with web-based tools with no coding? You know, it's like an order of magnitude more time to code something than it is to mock it up or prototype it.
No, no, sorry, what I meant is if you went to developer and
Yeah.
you gave a dummy, another person went to developer and did something a bit more easy, like just a wireframe, the developer would prefer the dummy that's more bit stage
The
ahead.
more information they've got, the better.
And that would reduce your cost too.
And
the,
it,
the
but
more
it will,
ahead
will.
you
And
are.
also it means you've already made some decisions.
Oh yeah.
By going through that process, you're going to go through the process of trying a few different
You don't
things.
waste their time.
You can even do A/B testing, and you can go to some people on the street and go, do you prefer this one or this one? And you can do that without paying programmers.
Yeah.
So whether the programmer's quote's that different, I don't know. But more information is always good. But it's definitely going to save you time in terms of your business because
Yeah.
you are going to be able to make more decisions without spending so much money.
With regards to like fundraising with VCs or even angels, etc.
Yeah.
In your experience, what would be like your top 3 kind of tips from a technical standpoint that you should go into VC meetings with or prepared for?
So to be honest, don't get many technical questions in those kind of meetings. In fact, I think I've done a number of pitches, and there was only one where there was a technical person, and that one's the easiest one because we had a bit of camaraderie, and that was kind of cool. So in terms of going into a VC or investor meeting as a technical person, the most important things are being able to communicate. Basically, if they see a developer and they can communicate, then that's already great. They can see you there, and if you're enthusiastic, and they can see that there's a team as well. Sure, no, thanks for yeah. So it's better to go into an investor meeting with a team to show your whole team, show that you exist and that you work well together and communicate well together, than go in as a solo founder, for example. So basically turn up, be enthusiastic. There are some there are some really common questions you get. So you might get like, is it secure? Does it scale? Which is often irrelevant. Those kind of questions. But you know, a couple of meetings and you kind of learn those questions. So that's it really. Yeah. Yes.
I mean, just following from his question, because I've seen companies that claim to, if you have your product, better come to them and they do some due diligence, they check the bugs, make sure it's fit for a investment of VC.
All right.
They do testing, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
Is that, have you heard of these sort of things?
Do you mean general testing, or do you
I
mean
don't know.
like security penetration
Maybe
testing?
just
or?
make it the right standard, or you know,
So
that you actually can prove independently that you say what it does. You know, because you can
So
say
this
does
company
something,
is
but the
selling
VC
the service to
like a due
validate your
diligence, yeah,
application.
like a due diligence, whatever, testing everything and proving that what you tell the VC is correct, and they'll give an independent report. I mean, I've heard
Did
of
the
companies.
VCs ask for that?
No,
So
I'm
I'd
saying you give the report to them anyway.
Okay. So I'd
Have you heard
say
of this?
if I haven't heard of exactly that,
Okay.
I would say that if a VC or an investor asks for something like that as part of due diligence, then obviously you're going to do it anyway. And I'd say that in terms of testing your application, you know, there's things you can do, which include outsourcing.
But
So one of those is it's quite there are websites now, and you can basically go and pay to get user testing, and you can pay a small amount per user, and you can scale it up or down as your budget allows. So that's a good thing to do. And if you're looking at something which needs to be secure, then you can do security penetration testing. Thanks for coming. Yeah, security penetration testing, which if it's something where security is a key thing, that's definitely something that would impress an investor. So if there are specific areas like that, I'd say yes, but I wouldn't say go and pay a company who basically, that sounds like they're just trying to
add more value.
get some money out of you for, investors are investing in your business and your potential and you. And like I say, unless it's a specific security, which you do need to prove. So do you have one more question?
I just think, how kind of touching just then, sometimes we keep hearing about the massive, huge increase in hacking at the moment. And obviously, this, if you're a startup and you're very small, that's probably not an issue, but depending on scale quite quickly. Is there a way of I suppose you can't stop people hacking, but, and you said about security, but can you, for example, mirror what your information is, so that if someone hacks one server, you've got a backup server, or is that something that's possible?
Yes.
Okay.
So there's a whole bunch of measures which are kind of at the infrastructure level. This is something that your CTO would be. That's a CTO-like decision, but it's certainly something you can ask if you're paying a development house. You can ask about, and you can get them to give you different options. So. Yes.
For the information, for example, so if you're taking credit card details online and details of your client base, obviously that's valuable in itself, just the client base, never mind their credit card details. If someone hacks you, you need to be able to, have that somewhere that they can't get at.
Yes, so most applications have one or more levels of backup. A type of backup is one where your server gets completely backed up, maybe every hour or every night or both. And that's standard. That's probably the minimum level for a grown-up application. There are more complicated architectures where you've got a standby server which is mirroring your whole database at any one time. And that's there not just for security reasons, that's there for scalability and also failover. Failover is like maybe your main server fails and it means the other one's going to pick up where that one left off. And there's all kinds of options around that. But it sounds like you're already well placed to kind of have that conversation with your developer or your provider. But I think what I'd say is go for a really solid hosting provider. I'm assuming this is some kind of hosted
It's quite in the sky at the moment until I get the funding in. It's like, for example, the NHS got hacked a few weeks ago, and think of the NHS, which presumably has every security measure in its presumably. Probably got more than your average server.
So most of the hacks that get in the news are people or organisations that haven't updated their software, or it's human error like really weak passwords, or being talked into giving away your password somewhere. So those are the main.
On an individual level or on a
individual level?
So if my administrator, my PA, for example, gives away her password, can that be used to hack into the?
Yeah, it might do. Depends on what permissions that PA's got. So so often the kind of door that hackers use is
really
get in via the human error, and that is far more common than any really kind of technical solution.
Is that not built into the security where you allow different people
different levels of passwords?
They can get to different
so that's part of that. So security is a whole another talk, but really good question. Yeah, thank you. I think we might have to leave it there. Thanks for coming. And there's probably another free beer on your way out. There's probably one left each. So thanks guys.